Why, hello again. It's Mr. Hollywood once again. And once again, Tom Richardson will be reviewing another Mannequin movie. This time, it will be Mannequin 2, On the Run, or On the Move, I should say, which has a pretty big role for me this time around. Oh, it's just so fabulous. I'm going to get Tom Richardson right now because this is just another one of those great adventures where Mr. Hollywood gets to be in the film, and it's just so wonderful, and I just love working with the mannequins in the mall. But enough of my little chit chat. I'm going to get Tom Richardson once again for you. So, hey guys, that was my Mr. Hollywood impression once again. Mr. Hollywood is one of the returning characters in this new sequel, Mannequin 2 On the Move, which I messed up on with the title a second ago. It is Mannequin 2 On the Move, that's the name of the movie. This is the sequel to the 1987 film called Mannequin, which I recently reviewed. Mannequin 2 On the Move, though, is a 1991 follow up that it's a sequel to the first film, but it takes place around different characters. How this mannequin came to life is different than the first film. How the mannequin is handled as far as who can see her and who can interact with her is handled differently in this new film. But the character of Hollywood does return. The store that the first film took place in, the Prince and Company store that the Andrew McCarthy character worked for, um, William Ragsdale, I think, is the lead actor in this one. He also works for Prince and Company in this one. He's like the store intern of some kind. But yeah, Mr. Hollywood is, like the first film. There's actually a lot of similarities with this film and the first one. He works with Mr. Hollywood, and they get the mannequin set up and everything like that. But this time around, this guy's more like the store intern more than anything. He's learning, probably I think he's trying to become store management eventually is what this guy was trying to do in this movie. But he's working with a mannequin where when you take the necklace off of her, she comes to life, and basically anybody can interact with her. She can, she interacts with people just like anybody else would. But because she's from this medieval time that where basically she got frozen and got this necklace put on her, basically causing her to get frozen through all these years. And people didn't figure this out until obviously this guy did at this mall, the store in the mall. And so basically, she's trying to figure out what the modern world is, why it took people as long as it did to get her out of this state. And, history kind of bites itself in the butt again because there's an evil sorcerer who we're introduced to right away in the film around the time that the girl gets frozen, where there was this evil sorcerer that basically put this necklace on her, and he has a great great grandchild that is basically the lead villain of the movie, played by Terry Kiser. Terry Kiser, for those of you who don't remember him, he was in Weekend at Bernie's as Bernie, and he was also in Friday the 13th Part 7 as the therapist of the lead character. But he's the villain of the movie. And so basically, long story short, basically, the sorcerer, the great great grandson of the sorcerer, wants the mannequin again, once the necklace, once the girl, and as this romance is blossoming between this store intern and the mannequin, obviously that becomes conflicted with what the sorcerer wants, and Hollywood's trying to put on a show for the store, as they have more like these little plays now at the store. It's obviously with the sorcerer's desires that conflicts again. So obviously there's a lot of conflict around going on in this movie, and it's difficult for this guy and this mannequin girl who comes to life to form a romance with each other just because of all this complication that happens. So overall, you guys, Mannequin 2 On the Move was not quite as good as the first film, and I think it's pretty quite clear why. Obviously, the plot isn't quite as clean cut and clear as the first film. Um, it just wasn't quite as fun this time around. It felt weak the entire time. It felt very secondary, and I guess that's one thing this film has working against it is it does feel like a second movie, and I guess that's one of the worst things a sequel can do is feel like it is last place and that it is um, kind of unnecessary in a sense. And the Mannequin 2 does have a lot of those moments where it just feels like everything going on just doesn't really feel like a necessary follow up to the first movie. But for my positives of Mannequin 2 On the Run, I liked how the character of Hollywood does return for this. I did my impression of him once again for the opening of the video appropriately. Um, Oh, and by the way, I actually do have the movie with me here. So yeah, I reviewed Mannequin 1 not too long ago, and here's Mannequin 2 on the move. And that's the character of Hollywood, that's the new Mannequin, and that's the William Ragsdale character who's the new lead character of the movie. Just like how Andrew McCarthy and Kim Cattrall were the leads of the first movie. But yeah, I liked how the character of Hollywood did return. I liked how he brings a lot of fun and comedic aspects to the story. And there's even little plot twists every once in a while that does involve the necklace and involves him, and how they worked that in I thought was pretty unique and different and pretty cool. So I really liked how the Hollywood character returned for this movie. One thing that this film does improve upon with the first film, though, is the first film I complained about in my other review that I thought the security guard character was way too over the top in the first film. In this film, they don't really so much have a security guard character, but they do have a bodyguard character of the evil sorcerer's great grandson. And I felt like this was an improvement because I liked how, and I guess the best way to describe this group of three characters, since it's three characters this time rather than just one, kind of like what I wanted with the first movie. Um, they're kind of like goofy Russian characters. They kind of remind me of Ivan Drago from Rocky Four. For those who've seen that, imagine if there was three Ivan Dragos, but they had more of a comedic take on those three characters, or that one character split into three. And that's kind of what these three bodyguards were in this movie, and they protected the lead villain of the movie. And I kind of liked them. They were pretty goofy. Obviously the writing didn't completely support these characters. I thought they could have been giving better material to work with. But I liked the overall character idea that went into it. I liked how they didn't completely get rid of a security guard character. They brought it back in a way as a bodyguard, and there was three of them, and they were really goofy, and they remind you of Rocky Four. So they kind of had that nostalgic value to me, and I really liked how they approached it in this film over the previous film. And once again, the second film does live up to the concept and the story that the first film took on. So it is pretty alive and well here, but unfortunately, the script does wear it down quite a bit. Also, Mannequin 2 on the Move doesn't quite feel as cartoony as the first film, and I think that's another positive that maybe the sequel had over the first film is that it didn't quite feel as cartoony. It really did feel like real performances and a real story and things like that. But the script is just so weak that's kind of what ultimately brought it down. I liked how the mall set was pretty similar to the first film. It was live and bright and made you want to walk around this place and things like that. So I liked how they kept that similarity that the first film had because the first film really mastered it pretty well. But for my negatives of Mannequin 2, since I did complain about this in my positives when I was going over those, this film does have a pretty weak script for the most part. It's not quite as fun as the first film. They just the concept's there, the story is there, even some characters are there, but it's just not quite as fun as the first film, and that's ultimately a weaker script that wears this movie down. Also, I thought the villain in this film, the Terry Kiser villain, was pretty boring to watch in this movie. So thumbs down there. Just a pretty boring villain. I really thought the Terry Kiser character could have been more fun and interesting, and they just didn't really do anything with him. Obviously, he had a big part in the movie and everything like that. It's just as entertainment value goes, not a great villain. Also, my other complaint of Mannequin 2, this is kind of an unusual complaint. I felt this film wasn't romantic enough. I really felt like most of it was this guy and this girl learning about each other's time periods. It's mostly about the girl learning how the modern world works, just like how it's about this guy learning about how the medieval times worked back when this girl was around. But after a while, we really don't get much of a romance just because the script gets really messy and there's a lot of stuff going on. And it just doesn't really feel romantic. And I think that's one thing the first film really masters. It felt romantic. I really don't feel like these two characters were ever in love with in this movie, even though they say they were, and they had this a similar ending to the first film. As far as how the film concludes, I never really feel like these two characters were in love. And so I guess that's one thing the script could have also worked on is I really wanted something that felt a little bit more romantic than what they did. The 80s vibe is still alive and well in this movie, but it's not quite the same as it was in the first film. Once again, this film was made in 1991, so maybe that was a factor, but at the same time though, I think with a better film director involved or a better writer involved or maybe better set designers or something, they could have kept that 80s vibe alive and well in some way, but it's for some odd reason it just wasn't here. There are some pretty dumb characters in this film. Just you really are kind of shocked that it took this guy this long to that taking this necklace on and off, or why wasn't that figured out earlier and things like that. It's just a lot of really dumb characters and really dumb situations, and ultimately, I feel like that's how some of the villains can get away with some of the stuff in the movie, just because there's some pretty dumb characters overall in the movie. This film had a pretty bad and messy ending. I complained that in the first film it felt like a cheated ending. This ending in this film was just bad and messy. It was all over the place. I had no idea if it wanted to be an action ending or a comedic ending or a romantic ending or a dramatic ending. All four of those things felt like they were all kind of taken on at once, and the ending just feels really messy due to that choice. And once again, I felt like the lead actress and the lead actor, the guy who falls in love with the mannequin, it was a pretty boring couple for the most part. I just never really found them interesting. Nowhere near as interesting as Andrew McCarthy or Kim Cattrall was in the first movie. Just it felt pretty generic. I felt like they were just kind of going by the numbers and just every once in a while saying something romantic to each other, but neither character feels very interesting. At least Kim Cattrall's character was able to visit like points in history and things like that. This character, she comes right out of her own time period, and that's really all we get from her is kind of this fish out of water effect with her. Um, but pretty boring couple for the most part. I really wish we could have followed a more interesting couple in this film as far as a guy falling in love with the mannequin, just like it happened in the first movie. Overall, I'm going to give Mannequin 2 on the Move a 7 out of 10. There's things about the first film that are still alive and well in the sequel here, but the weak script, the boring villain, the fact that it wasn't romantic enough, that some of the 80s vibe got lost here, that there were some dumb characters, it was a bad and messy ending, and it was just a boring lead couple to follow throughout the runtime really wears the film down quite a bit. If you love the first Mannequin film a lot, maybe give this film one view, like as a rental, or like if you got the set like what I got here, definitely watch the first Mannequin several times. But Mannequin 2 is just one of those things where you'll probably just watch it once, say that you've seen it. It's okay, it's tolerable, but it's just not quite as fun as the first film. So 7 out of 10 for me. It's okay. If you love the first Mannequin, this is probably worth maybe just one view. If you didn't like the first Mannequin, you can avoid this film at all costs. It's just really not worth your time if you didn't like the first Mannequin film. So 7 out of 10. Mannequin 2 on the Move. It's an okay film.